There's nothing new about New Age. The thing is, New Age begins with the falling of original sin. That's the beginning of New Age. And it's called an age because it has an end. It's like the new creation in Jesus Christ has no end. And so when we part the two between New Age and the new creation, then we see our journey and our battle. New Age begins with original sin. The devil will always, till Jesus comes back and his power will be crushed forever, will always come up with a new way of conquering souls and strategies. And through every cycle of humanity, he will come up with something new of the old. You know, it's the old game dressed up in a new fashion. It denies the presence of God in your life completely. Positive thinking. They tell you that if you think positively, you are able to get what you want. Even if you fix up your goals in the future as if they are already being conceived, then you will achieve them. That's what they tell you. That's mental control, right? We have to have a positive attitude. That we should have. That means it's a virtue called hope. We should have hope. And we should have that confidence in God that builds us up into hope. And that is a positive attitude. But positive thinking will be turning yourself into God and pretending by thinking positively you are able to get what you want on your own, through your own thoughts and through your own attitude and through your own mind. So that is completely idolatry. You know, there's nothing to do, it has no relationship with God. And the other part is self-realization. Why do Christians fall into Eastern philosophies and like Buddhism and Hinduism? And they claim that self-realization is one of the main centers of their teachings. It's not about self-realization. It's about realizing God in our lives. It's completely the opposite, which means die to self instead of self-realization. Self-realization is the opposite of dying to self. So how could you describe self-realization best? Pride. That's what self-realization is about. And we are looking for Christ. That's who we look for. This is our realization, Christ. The Jews are looking for signs and the Hebrews for wisdom. But we are looking for a crucified Christ. And this is what we have to have very clear in us. So New Age is about bringing you into a position where you are adoring creation as opposed to adoring Creator. And it's very shrewd, it's very smart, you know, it's like, if you read all these philosophies of New Age, they are precious, beautiful, they are just adoring the elements of nature, creation, and they display the most incredible poetry, the most incredible philosophy. You shouldn't say that it's beautiful, I mean it's wonderful, but it's not about adoring and worshipping creation, because that's what pagans do. And then they bring you into this paganry, and they bring you into this self-conception of life by you observing creation and adoring it. And then at the end, what you do is you find that on your own you can conceive everything that is created, and you are supposed to be a creator. You see, one of the reasons why the devil is a devil is because he refused to be a creature in obedience to God. And then he told Eve, you will be like God. That's what he told her. See, the original sin is all about that. That's why it's New Age. It's that you will be like God if you eat of this fruit. And that's the teaching of New Age. We are gods. And you see the people in the world today. See, all the heroes in the world are human beings, you know, the actors, the musicians, the wealthy ones, the politicians, those are the heroes of today. Big heroes. And they are built up like gods. But it's amazing that those gods are all mortal gods, and they all, you know, go into a procession to the cemetery. None of them come out of there. See, I always tell people, you know who my hero is? my hero is the one that was able to go right into the tomb and came out of there. Say, none of these heroes of today enchant me and impress me. All of them go to the tomb, no one comes out. So I go with the one that came out. His name is Jesus. That's the only t-shirt I wear. I only have that flag. My hero, the one that came out of there. So the rest is just foolish and it's a fantasy. It's a temporary state and it's going to change. It's going to come to pass. So I'm not involved with that. And New Age is all involved about temporary triumph, the temporary glories, the glories of this world. And you worship that. That's why within New Age we have the worshiping of crystals that is called Feng Shui, originally from Japan. Say, we have Reiki, which is supposed to be a therapy, see, but it's mediumship, it's spiritualism. The Reiki masters, they all have degrees, and those degrees are not different than the degrees of Masons. They just have degrees of a spirituality of the dark. So the greater degrees of the Reiki master, the more healing they bring to you. It's like a spiritual massage, and what they do, they channel spirits, and they lay hands on you, and then you are healed from physical ailments, and you are actually healed. But what happens is, if you place yourselves in the hands of a Reiki master with a physical ailment, you will be healed, but you will have opened the doors to the spirits. So they don't mind healing your body, as long as they can take your soul. And that's why people are so naive, they think that all these alternative medicines make sense, because they heal you faster. And this is the way New Age moves on. Let's say you were 9 years old, and you were walking with some friends to a park, and a gypsy woman came in and offered to read your hand. And then you open up your hand like this, and she read your hand. So what happened is you open the door of your heart for spirits to look in. And therefore that door is still open, unless the church closes it down. But it will be open all of your life. They are able to come in through there. And then they work through that door that you open. That's why every action we have engaged with that has to do with divination, with numerologies, with mental control techniques, with any kind of alternative medicine that we are not aware of, exactly of the source. All of that are doors open into the darkness. But there are two ways of dealing with wounds. One, your wounds could be the source of purification and sanctification in your life. Because if you turn them into God and ask God for mercy and compassion, those wounds can sanctify you. Because you are bleeding and they are painful and they hurt, but you accept that as a cross in your life. You give it to God and say, Lord, I give you my wounds. I consecrate them to you. And please do not let these wounds be an instrument of evil. Please sanctify me with these wounds. When we are bleeding towards God and the wounds are focused on God and we offer them to God, then we have compassion of the wounds of our neighbor, because we know how it hurts, we know how it feels. And New Age is exactly the opposite. New Age is like a atheist psychologist that is counseling a woman that has trouble in her marriage. And then the answer of the psychologist is, you were created by God to be happy. You should leave that man, otherwise you will be unhappy all of your life. Leave him. Just go away and find another man that will make you happy. For sure God has a better choice in your life. And then that psychologist will destroy the sacrament. She will not be interested, or that psychology will not be interested in building up that marriage, and she will not be interested in teaching the patient for forgiveness or anything, or reconciliation of any kind. She will only talk to this patient to be happy, to find happiness, to find freedom in life. So everything that is an obstacle in your life, you should get rid of, because that is the calling of New Age. New Age is about glorifying yourself. It's about building up yourself. It's about finding your own freedom And thus that independence is exactly the flag of New Age, independence. Satan has all the cards on the table because he's a gambler, and he's putting it all out to get us so busy that we are 24 hours a day focused on this earthly life, and that way he steals from us the graces of eternal life, and that's what he's doing. So therefore all this movement of New Age, what they do is they focus people on temporary powers and on temporary benefits. Because if you know why people go to a witch, why do they have card reading, palm reading, spiritualists and talking to spirits, and all of these numerologies and astrologies and all these crystals and candles and all this flower therapy and flora therapy and these therapies of all kinds? Why do people get involved with that? The only reason people get involved with that is for plain temporary benefits. You know about Hinduism, and you know about yoga, see? And you know Hatha yoga is the first yoga, the ground yoga. And in the West, people are so ignorant about pagan religions and Eastern philosophies that they think Hatha yoga is just an exercise. See? And then when you know yoga, and you know there are 7 yogas, and Hatha yoga is the ground yoga, you know that yoga is a worshipping, is a body language worshipping to deities, gods, right? There is a god for every pose of yoga, right? They worship them. So when they do Hatha yoga, they are worshipping all those gods. See? And they do this for an hour, I don't know how long. So in the West, people are so ignorant about the East that they use that as exercise. And they benefit themselves because they turn like cats, right? Stressed out. I practiced that for 14 years in California. When I was an actor, a musician, in order to be in shape, I was practicing Hatha yoga at high degrees of temperature, sweating my life away, and I was so elastic, I was like a cat, right? And all because of Hatha yoga, right? I had no idea I was worshipping false gods. I was worshipping deities, and then later on when I converted and I understood what it meant, that it was an abomination for me as a Catholic to tap into false gods and worship them, then I began to talk about that, and I got all kinds of enemies in the church. Fortunately, the church already came out with a document, explaining why we should never practice it. And it's very simple, I give you an example. In the book of the Maccabees, there is a passage of Judas Maccabee. He was wondering why his soldier has lost the last war, because they were always protected by God. They will win all their battles. They will defeat the enemy always. They were all a prayerful army. They were in prayer. They were faithful Jews. They were faithful to God. And that battle they lost. So Judas was very curious about it and went to see his dead soldiers. And when he opened up their uniforms, they had amulets around their necks. So what happened is, in the last war they won, they took the amulets out of the dead soldiers they killed and put them on for good luck. See? Next battle, they were all killed. See, that's one of the biggest signs of the systems of purgatory that the church uses, because Judas Maccabee immediately went collecting money to send to Israel, for them to Jerusalem, for them to pray for the dead, for the salvation of the dead. So this is an example of what an abomination is. We can never touch anything that comes from a foreign god. As simple as that. Never. So New Age is about inviting us to join all kinds of gods and cultures, and not to think much of that. We are all brothers and sisters. We all belong together. So we can hold hands and share our religions and our cultures as one. That is a lie. That's why the European Union is trying to get with all the countries, They are taking down all the cultural idiosyncrasies, everything, and turning them into one thing. And then religion is not to be discussed publicly anywhere. No one should wear any religious garments anywhere. And they are getting to that. What they're trying to do is to stop religion and then stop God in people's life. That's what they're doing. So it's a very subliminal force. So every door we open into the dark becomes a window where the devil comes in, and that's exactly what New Age is about. You know, the Hebrews that were taken into the Exodus by Moses, they were there for 430 years, and then many generations were born in Egypt. So they had an Egyptian culture, though they had Hebrew blood. So when God took them out of Egypt and got them through the desert, one of the main lessons they had to learn, they had to exorcise themselves from the Egyptian culture. And you notice that every time Moses was taking a little long, they will turn to worship, all kinds of false gods, because they had that culture. They were not Egyptians, but they were born there. So that's exactly what we are on earth. We are in Egypt, and then God is teaching us not to worship anything of the earth, not to worship nature, not to worship any power of the earth. And then every time we go to worship self, worship money, worship any human power, worship anything of earth, then God comes in and says, this is not what you have to. And then that's how the Spirit of God comes after us. This is the teaching. We are to set ourselves free from idolatry. We are to set ourselves free from worshiping creation. I have seen whole communities, religious communities, go down because they let New Age come into the convents. They begin with enneagrams, all kinds of numerologies, all kinds of mental techniques and all kinds of technologies and all kinds of things that will pervert the convents, and they will become so intelligent, so bright, so aware, so up to date, that they will destroy the convent, because the spirit of division comes in, pride comes in, human intelligence and talents bloom the wrong direction, and all of this destroys the religious life. The prayer life goes down, love goes down, compassion goes down, pride comes up. So, and then the vocations are over, God will not bless them, and at the end, the whole community falls apart. I've seen that time and time again. One time I was in Toronto, about 9 years ago, and I went to this sister, to a convent, for a retreat. I wasn't giving a retreat to a sister, but they rent out the place for retreats. And I went there with a group of lay people, and I gave a 3-day retreat on a weekend. And then as I was walking to the convent grounds, I began to see all these circles of fire, crystals, all kinds of symbology that from New Age. And then I talked to the nun, the Mother Superior, and I said, why are you involved with all of this? Don't you know that all of this comes from the devil? All of this is New Age. And she said, oh son, I read your story, and I know you just came into the church. You have a long way to go before you know what I know. See, I know best. I have been a nun for 37 years in this community. That's why I'm Mother Superior today. And all of these are gifts of God. So, imagine that. I was going like, whoa. See, who could talk to her? I was going, Mother, I respect what you do, but I do not agree with it, and I think this is from the devil. I hope you get rid of that, because otherwise this convent is going to go down. And I asked her, how many new vocations do you have in the last 5 years? And then she was silent. She walked away. See, I realized there were only 5 nuns, and they had, I don't know how many people working for them, because they turned that place into a great retreat place for Muslims, for Buddhists, for all kinds of people who were going to retreats there. And then I didn't know that but I found out later. So I came back 2 years later to the same area, but we went to a retreat somewhere else. And I asked the lady that put together those retreats about that convent. And she said that convent went down all the way. Mother Superior died of cancer not very soon after I was there. And then the other ones, they sold the place, and each one of them had a condominium, and they live independent from one another, each one on their own apartment. That was the end of the convent, So, and those things are because of the source of evil. You know, people are not aware of the great damage that this brings in, because God absolutely despises that. That is an abomination. There is nothing that God hates more than you bringing in anything from foreign gods, anything that has to do with magic, divination, superstitions, nothing like that. All of that comes from the dark. And then most of it is apparently beneficial. And that word is so dangerous. I'm going to ask the Lord for His word, and I'm going to read to you from Romans 12:1. Christian life, be concerned for others. I beg you, dearly beloved, by the mercy of God, to give yourselves as a living and holy sacrifice, pleasing to God. Such is the worship of a rational being. Don't let yourselves be shaped by the world where you live, but rather be transformed through the renewal of your mind. The word of the Lord. Amen.